Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. Something slightly different this week. We're going to talk about racing. We're joined by a couple of gentlemen racers, Andrew Seaton and BikerEdd Ed Harris. And we're going to talk about accessible racing. So what kind of racing can we just pretty much rock up and have a go at? So these guys race hare and hounds and rallies and enduros. So if you've ever fancied having a go at racing, hopefully there's something in here for you. And maybe you've never fancied having a go at racing, but after this, you might have a go. On your marks, get set, podcast. Noel's not going to join us tonight because all he'd do is going, "Oh no, what do you want to go racing for? You could just stay at home, in bed, drink tea and eat toast with marmalade on it."
Nailed it.
He has got I actually got him to come and do a rally with me once, but he's no interest in racing at all.
He's not a racer at all. Well, we might convert him over.
Not a fucking chance.
This might be the changing point in his life. No.
No. But what I wanted to get from this, obviously we do get a lot of people that are quite new to trail riding and adventure riding. And I just thought to give them a bit of an eye-opener on what type of racing you can do without spending a fortune. It's something that's a little bit more accessible, really. You can just kind of rock up, razz around a forest, do a bit of a time section and go home. Have you ever raced anything at all, Will, motorcycle-wise? I'm thinking the answer is no.
No, that felt like a loaded question.
Well, I just guess...
I'm assuming not, because,
Yeah.
you know...
Yeah, because you're not very fast and all that kind of stuff. Not that you have to be fast.
Well, there is that.
So a lot of people to our podcast are fairly new to the whole trail riding and adventure riding thing. So just give them a bit of an idea about what type of racing is available to them. And for that very purpose, we're very pleased to welcome gentlemen racers, Andrew Seaton and BikerEdd Harris. And also guest presenter, Will Linson. Is it Ed or Edward? Which you prefer?
Ed, depends if I'm in trouble. Edward if I'm in trouble.
Noel can't join us tonight because I didn't fucking invite him.
Oh,
no.
We know somebody that's got a bit of a link to a very high-level enduro racer, and Noel didn't even know who he was. And he was like, why should we have him on the podcast? We don't want somebody that good because it's just, that's just a world away from what every other bloke or woman can achieve, right?
if he's not here, then are you going to re-record the intro?
No, I can't be arsed with all that. No, it's all automated.
Oh, my good mate. You could just have a little soundbite, just
Hello.
splice it in.
Welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my sort of good friend, Will Linson.
Fucking made it. I've made it, boys. I was out.
Let's start off with some introductions. Now, many of you will have seen our first guest, Andrew Seaton, commonly known as Seats, on the films of Ollie Moto. He's Ollie's second best friend. He used to be his best friend, but I think it's probably me now.
Outrageous.
So give us a bit of an intro, Seats. Tell us who you are, what kind of riding you do, that sort of thing.
So I'm Seats, otherwise known on Ollie's social media platforms as that 990 guy, which is ironic in many comments because I no longer really ride the 990. So I'm just that guy pretty much now. What have I done? So I was a late bloomer to biking. I picked it up at a late age because I used to do some circuit racing with cars. So bikes were never really at the forefront of stuff. I did sports bikes and fast stuff on the roads, had a couple of close calls and then went to the dirt. And I haven't looked back since. Big adventure bikes, big bike wankers is where I reside. And I quite enjoy that. Done a few international events and rallies and stuff, but that's kind of it, really. I'm a middle of the road, middle of the pack rider, nothing fancy, but like to get stuck in and give it a go.
Exactly. Well, I think that's what a lot of people want to do, really. And one of the questions I've got down for later, are you actually competing or are you just entering these things for the crack and have a bit of fun? And I think I probably know the answer for you, Andrew.
Depends what the event is as well. Some of the events that I've done, I know full well that it's just there to complete it and try and get around. Other stuff where you stand a bit more of a chance, you're in there to have a go. But overall, the big thing for me is just to have a laugh. I just enjoy riding with my mates.
And you have just got a new bike though, haven't you?
I have indeed, yeah. So I've just picked up a new to me 690 enduro, but pretty much a 690 rally. I've just been fortunate enough to use some of my savings and put a Posket 732 into it, and it's fired up for the first time 2 days ago. I had a little excited moment.
Does it drive now?
I haven't ridden it yet, no. So I'm just putting heat cycles on it at the moment just to get the first oil change out of the way. And it will be on the dyno towards the end of May. It needs a dyno setup to be tuned properly because the engine's quite a bit different to the stock motor. So.
And have you bought it for a purpose? Are you going to go and enter something specific with it, or?
So I've got my eyes set on doing the Real Way to Dakar in 2025.
Tell us what that is.
So it's a 2-week rolling bivouac event, which kind of mirrors as close as possible to the original Dakar routes from Paris down to Dakar in Senegal. It's a fairly hard event to do. It's nothing extreme, but it is hard. The days are long and the riding's obviously through the sand dunes and bits and the pistes, but it's also open to bigger capacity bikes because there's a lot of the international stuff which is capped at 450. The older bikes or the bigger bikes I like to ride, you can't get into the events with them. Whereas this one is open to those classes. And you can do that as an adventure rider, or you can do it with road book and all the rest of it and actually race.
BikerEdd, Ed Harris, tell us who you are, what you ride. Now, this guy is worth looking up. I don't know if are your videos on YouTube, Ed?
They're on YouTube mostly, yeah.
So if you want to see somebody fucking ragging a big bike scarily fast, then you should have a look at some of Ed's videos. Fuck me, is he quick? That's why he's here. Anyway, Ed, tell us who you are.
I started out racing enduro from a young age. So I started probably 13 or 14 years old or so, doing hare and hound enduro races, then kind of did my road bike license when I was old enough to it. And then I had a Tiger 800 at the time. And I watched, I really can't remember his name. There was a guy who did, with Triumph, he did a round the world trip on a Tiger 800 and put it all on YouTube. I can't remember his name. And I watched a load of his videos and thought, that looks pretty cool. I reckon I could probably do that. From that point on, sort of the adventure bikes then kind of became off-road bikes, and the two kind of hobbies sort of met in the middle. And as you say, I'm probably now more, I guess, known for riding the big adventure bikes off-road, although most of my life has been doing the little bikes. Now I kind of do a mixture of all of them.
So what have you got in the garage at the moment?
So I've got the KTM 1190 Adventure R that I do the big bike racing with, and then I've got a KTM 300 TPI that I do the enduro racing with. I've also got, never gets posted on the Instagram or anything, I've got a BMW 1200 RT, proper old man bike that I use that as a daily commuter every day because I was just putting the miles on the 1190, kept breaking it and it wasn't reliable. So I got a BMW for the daily commute, and then I got loads of other little bits and like projects kicking around. But those are sort of the main bikes at the minute.
That 1190 is special though, isn't it?
It was so probably I could come on this in a bit maybe, but last year racing at Sweetlam, I had quite a bad crash and broke my scaphoid bone in my hand, which takes a long time to heal. So I had a lot of time to kill in getting it set up properly. To be honest, even so, I don't know if you've seen recently, I've actually cracked a mounting boss off the frame. So I need to get that welded, or the whole headlight sort of hangs off these two sort of fragile welded on bosses. And I noticed riding home the other day that the headlight was wobbling up and down to a kind of insane amount, and stripped it back, and yeah, it's cracked some parts off the frame. So that is the caveat with big bike. I know, I'm not sure this is a cable tie job.
Everything's a cable tie job.
The kind of caveat with big bike racing is, although it might look really, and it is super good fun, but honestly, I reckon I spend more time in the garage than I do actually racing the thing. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
That is one of the problems with the big bikes. When they hit the ground, they really fucking hit the ground, don't they?
I tell you what, because I always had Tiger 800s before this, and I love my Tiger 800s, but I spend so much time bending them back into shape. And as I kind of met more and more people and did more and more stupid things on the big bikes, it just became more and more. I realized I needed to get something that was kind of more capable. And the 1190, I had a really, really fast crash last year where I broke my hand, and the damage was, I think I broke a rear brake pedal and I twisted the forks ever so slightly, and that was basically it in terms of actual damage on the bike. They crashed so much better.
Yeah, it's true actually. KTMs in general crash really, really well. I know with my Honda CRF, a couple of crashes on that, and yeah, you end up bending metal back into shape. We've mentioned a few type of racing already. Now, I've sort of written down a list of the type of racing that's available for sort of off-road motorbikes, sort of the things that people that listen to this podcast might be interested in. So we've got motocross, which is pretty straightforward. It's basically bikes riding around an off-road circuit. It used to be called scrambling when I was a kid, and the jumps weren't quite as big back in the day. So there's various different... You can do vintage motocross now, which I really enjoy going to watch, and those courses tend to be through sort of fields with very little jumping going on. And obviously there's like the supercross, which is an indoor version of the same, which pretty much only happens in the US, seemingly. We've then got enduro, which there's an extreme version of that, and there's also now an enduro cross version, which is an indoor version as well. Now, in all my years of riding motorbikes off-road, enduro, the way enduros work always seems to do my head in. So it'd be good if one of you's got some experience of that. You could actually explain how a time card enduro works. We've then got, Ed, you mentioned hare and hounds. Really are fairly similar to motocross, aren't they? But they tend to be on a more technical, natural circuit.
It's a much longer track. So usually the club I race with, at least, you usually have a 6 mile or so long track. It either ties in a motocross track or it's just in straight fields. And you do, for my club at least, you do 2 hours in the morning and then 2 hours in the afternoon. Or if it's really bad conditions, you do a 3 hour straight through race. And it's essentially whoever's done the most laps wins. And if you've done the same laps as someone else, then it's who did the laps in the shortest amount of time. And you get penalties for being over time. But it's often, those tracks are kind of, they're very natural tracks, and they're either tied onto a motocross track or they're just somewhere completely out in the middle of nowhere. I'm actually racing this weekend at a track near Bedford that is on an old closed golf course, which is super cool. I've only ever raced there once before, but it was a golf course that closed down for whatever reason, and they didn't have anything else to do with the land after it shut down. So it's now been leased out to my club to run enduro events for. And last year we even... you're going through the sand bunkers and you're going through the old clubhouse, and it's a proper cool track, but they can be anywhere.
I'm quite jealous. I've always had a bit of a fantasy of razzing around on a golf course. I think I've said it before. That would be ace.
Where can you do that legally? Like, how many people can say that they've ragged a dirt bike around a golf course legally?
Very few places. But Moto Junkies in Wales, they're now based on a part of an old golf course.
Oh, there you go. Maybe there's a little sales thing here. Try and find closed down golf courses and set up tracks on them.
Great use for a golf course.
They should do both, like have extreme golf where they're still playing, but you're razzing around them.
That's a great idea.
So the other one was, well, we've got trials, which isn't really racing. It's taking small bikes over extreme obstacles and not putting your feet down. We've also got Supermoto, which is, again, a circuit thing, but half of it's on a tarmac track and then the other half is on a dirt track, usually a fairly smooth dirt track.
Kind of like rallycross, isn't it? Rallycross for the cars is kind of like supermoto racing. Yeah.
And I think rallying's something we should talk about as well, because there's obviously, everybody knows the Dakar Rally, these big international multi-day, huge distance races using a road book that are incredibly difficult, versus then you've got some of the UK rallies, which I've done in the past, which was that's the only race I've ever got Noel to do once. But the version that I did, UK rallying, this was a good few years ago now, but you basically get access to a forest that you wouldn't normally get access to. You get to razz around at legal speeds on the fire tracks. So no more than 30 miles an hour. That's an absolute limit that nobody ever broke. So you're blasting along the fire tracks, and every now and again you'll see an arrow pointing into the forest, and obviously then you follow a track and it's a little bit more technical. Part of that, and these are 30 on average 30-mile loops around a big forest somewhere. The Rydale is a famous one. There's quite a few others. I'm not sure, they may have changed recently, but basically you do, I think on the Saturday you do 4 laps and on the Sunday you do 3 laps. They might have 1 or 2 time sections interspersed throughout that 30-mile lap. And they were really good fun because you get to ride in places you'd never normally ride in. But I don't know if they've changed now. I don't know if they're more road book orientated or...
No, so they're still the same. So they're still arrowed courses, marked courses. And like you say, you do 4 laps on the Saturday, 3 laps on the Sunday. The guys that run them are really struggling now because of access to forestry land and restrictions that are placed on those areas. So the Rydale's just been cancelled for this year, which, like you said, is a great event. Really good. Some really nice terrain, some decent technical riding for rallies as well, but fast. And yeah, the guys have just had to cancel the event, which was sold out. It's an awkward place for the guys that are using the forestry land. Certainly the guys down south in Wales as well, the Breckford and the Beacons, they've got the same problems as well.
Use the forestry land. You can't use this anymore.
So I I don't know if it's the forestry saying you can't use it. I think they get a lot of problem with illegal riding and people using areas that they shouldn't be normally, which creates a bad name for everybody. Like the Breckfer is based out of a farm, and we use a lot of the farmer's land. And he's an awesome guy. You know, he's a biker himself, and the guys have a really good reputation. But every year it's the same thing. You know, just remember that you're riding on private property at the moment. This isn't somewhere you can come and ride when the race isn't on, sort of thing. I guess probably lots of places that do those sort of events are going to start to struggle as more and more green lanes are closed, as we're all aware of.
It's a really common story as well. You have the same thing with the kind of enduro racing I do. I've seen tracks and venues come and go quite a lot, and it's a very similar story that at the end of each track, there's always a farmer or a couple of farmers that own the land that you're racing on that you need to keep on side. And it's not like a motocross track where it's always there and it's just a battle to keep the motocross track open. It comes around once a year. And you've got to show that, well, last year we were good and it all worked well, so it's worth you putting the effort and letting us use that land again.
Hopefully there'll be some kind of resolution to that. But if you can get an entry into a rally, they're not crazy expensive, are they? How much are they?
So they range from sort of 140 to, I think the most expensive one's about 180 quid for the weekend.
And that's for 2 days riding?
That's for 2 days riding.
Camping.
And it covers all the medical support and stuff. And that includes like your 1 day license as well for the ACU or whichever club is governing the race.
Tell us both then, let's start with you, Ed. Tell us about, you've mentioned Hare and Hounds and you've mentioned Enduros. Tell us a little bit more about the racing you do and why do you choose the big bike over the little bike sometimes and vice versa?
The Hare and Hound racing, I kind of fell into it because there was an event that used to run about 200 meters away from where my family home was, where I grew up. So every year we'd go and watch this race and I really wanted to get into it and kind of got into it that way. Luckily, my family, especially my dad, was super supportive of it because at 13 years old or so, I couldn't even drive myself to races, let alone afford a bike or the maintenance or anything. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And I started doing Hare and Hound races with a couple of clubs I've been through. And as I say, that's kind of traditionally, it's 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, or a 3 hour straight through, or a similar kind of format over a 6 mile or so long lap. It's mostly sort of cross-country riding across fields or through single track and woodland. Occasionally it's tagged onto a motocross track, but primarily you're talking, you know, fast open stuff or fast flowing single track. That's kind of where it differs from the extreme enduro that I think extreme, well, Seaton can probably back this up or not. I think extreme enduro probably gets more publicity nowadays, or it's more sort of trendy. There's a lot of kind of Erzberg and Romaniacs and those kind of things. But Hare and Hounds, I think, is probably more accessible to someone that actually wants to go start racing, because generally there's nothing too daunting or nothing too challenging. You've usually got a couple of hill climbs, maybe a few jumps, but most of the time you get easy opt-out sections and different bits of that, which make it super accessible. But I did that for quite a number of years, and I've always done Hare and Hounds on the little bike. That's always been a little bike thing. The big bike kind of ridiculousness has only sort of come around in the last sort of couple of years, where as it's become, again, I think the kind of big bike scene is kind of growing exponentially, and the racing scene for it as well. You know, there weren't really events for big bikes 5 years or so ago. There was maybe the All-Terrain Rally Championship and a few other things going.
We're doing everything we can to stop it, obviously.
Of course. Absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, now that, you know, you've got kind of events like Sweet Lamb Academy and Sherco Off-Road and Waters Arena have been doing a few as well. There's a lot more stuff that's kind of accessible to the big bikes to go racing, which is a lot of fun. It's very silly, but it's a lot of good fun as well.
Whenever I think of like enduro or trials, so if you think of enduro, I just think of Graham Jarvis picking his way up a waterfall. And that's not an accessible sport to me. That is a sport of titans that know exactly what they're doing. And you don't think about the kind of the grassroots, the kids getting into it.
You're dead right about things like the Erzberg, because they actually design a course that they only want like a handful of people to finish, don't they?
And it makes for great video. It makes for great watching, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Very dramatic, absolutely dramatic racing, without a doubt.
But I wouldn't finish watching that and think, I'd like to do that.
Exactly. I went to go watch Valleys Extreme this year, and I thought, wow, this is really fun to watch and not be riding in.
Talk to me about enduros then. How does an enduro work? Because you have a time card enduro, you have laps and you have sections, and I can't work out whether it's about who can just razz around in the fastest time, or is it more of a consistency thing that you have to get to a certain point, clock in, and it's about reliability? I don't know. Tell me about them.
For what I do, for Hare and Hounds, it's riding fast consistently. So you don't have liaisons, you don't have anything between time stages. It's just the clock starts, you go, you have like a little tag on your wrist, or you've got a time transponder on your bike somewhere, and as soon as you ride through the gate, that starts the clock, and then for a set amount of time you're trying to do as many laps as you possibly can in that time, and then once the time expires, you're either pulled in, or in my club it's up to you to decide whether you want to do the extra lap at the end or not, and if you're over time you start receiving penalty points for not being back in the time. But that, I would say, is probably a much more full-on style compared to kind of time cards. Have you ever done any time card enduro seats? Because it's something I've actually not really done too much of.
Yeah, so I've not done a proper time card enduro, but the UK rally or rally rounds, they follow a similar sort of format. So effectively you have a time to start your lap, and then you have a time to start your timed section, if that makes sense. So you might start your lap at 9 o'clock, let's say, but your timed section doesn't start until 9:40, but you've got a 15-mile late or 15-mile route to get to that section. So you can't like dawdle, you've got to ride at a pace, but when you get there, you normally get a chance to have a 5-minute break, of take some water, have a quick bite to eat or something, and then go and do your time section. And that element is balls to the wall, go as fast as you can. And then you get to the end, and then you'll have a time to clock in or a time to be back to start your next lap on. So most of the UK rounds run like a 2-hour allowance per lap. And within that 2-hour lap, you might have 2 timed sections within there to make times for, is generally how they work.
Got you. So it's that balls out riding that always scares the life out of me. Because, again, I've done those rallies, and you do your time section, and it's probably a relatively short section, maybe.
It is, yeah.
A couple of miles, 3 miles, 5 miles, I'm not really sure. But that riding as fast as you can, so you're that close to the limit constantly. You're that close to falling off all the time. And it's just the thought of people that ride those big international rallies. So you're going across the Sahara or when they used to go across the Sahara as fast as they could for like 6 hours, and you're doing over 100 miles an hour. That's terrifying.
It's like everybody's limit's different though, isn't it?
It's exhilarating, I can tell you that.
I'm sure.
There's a clip of Sam Sunderland flying down a beach on the Dakar. And then Toby Price is like sort of one-handed smoking a cigarette, just cruises past him. His limit is higher. Yeah.
But that's probably an important sort of difference there, is with those kind of races, you don't generally get to sight the lap, or you don't get to see what you're going to ride beforehand because they're over such great distances.
Yeah.
Whereas usually with hare and hounds, you don't often get a sighting that, but usually anyone that's kind of serious either knows the track already fairly well, or you turn up on the Saturday and go for a pedal around and have a look at any interesting features. Whereas time card and especially rally racing, you're solely relying on your road book, aren't you, to tell you what you're going to hit.
Pedal around. So you bring a bicycle, you're not allowed to ride it on your...
It's literally the only time I ride a bicycle anymore. Yeah,
really?
Because you're on farmers' land and stuff. You kind of have these noise restrictions, and you don't ride bikes around. For my club at least, there's no engines on the Saturday, and your engine starts Sunday. Purely for noise, and also I think because otherwise you'd end up, if you had sort of 200 people turning up on the Saturday to go like sight round a track, it would just turn into all kinds of carnage.
Well, what I'm saying is, could you take an electric motorcycle, do extra practice laps, cheat the system?
Lots of people take electric bicycles, so we're there pedaling around the track, and this guy comes flying past in his brand new £10,000 e-bike. And you're like...
That's an interesting question, actually, because presumably there are different classes that you can race. So if somebody's got a CRF 300, for example, there's nothing stopping them from entering. There'll be a class for them, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I mean, even in my club, even Hare and Hounds, which is kind of the more balls to the wall variation of the ones we're talking about, that has a trail bike class where something like a 250 or a 300L would classify for.
Was it capacity or power they do it on?
Capacity.
It depends on club to club. I mean, my club have classes based off of capacity, so E1, E2, and E3, and then the trail bike class is kind of a separate one off to the side. I don't know, the line is kind of a little bit blurred as to what counts as a trail bike and what doesn't. I would say something like a 250L definitely counts as a trail bike, but then you've kind of got like these Beta 300X trainers, which are kind of technically classified as a trail bike, but it's basically an enduro bike.
So what about age classes? Do they have age for somebody like me who's relatively young, but actually, old in years? I could probably go and rock up to the over 60s and do quite well.
Usually they've got a veterans class, which is usually plus 50 or plus 60, depending on the club. So you probably wouldn't classify to that yet. I think you're 30, 40, something around.
Ish, yeah.
Give or take.
Seats, have you done an international rally?
I have indeed, yes.
And you've also done the hard Alpi, haven't you?
I Yeah, yep.
Tell us about those.
So I'll start with the hard Alpi. So the hard Alpi is more of I think it's classed as an adventure trail ride or something. So it's not a race. That's the thing to get into that one. However, it is a really good excuse to go trail riding through some awesome areas in the Alps. It's run by a really good club, and they get you out. And the challenge with the hard Alpi is the fact that you are riding a bike for a long period of time. The basic version of the hard Alpi, which is like the classic, or I think they call it the classic now. The original version was a 24-hour ride, and it's non-stop. So you ride for, I think it's like 690 kilometers, with 70% of it's being off-road, and you're on off-road trails in the middle of the Italian Alps, on the side of a mountain in the middle of the night. Can't see anything, but you just got to keep going.
How do you know where you are? Is this
so it's GPS based? Yeah,
right.
So it's GPS. You get your GPX route, and you just follow the purple line.
I've never understood. What's the difference between the GPX and the road book?
A world of difference.
Well, yes, but what are they named? Are they named differently, or is it like they're both rally raid, but one is?
A raid generally tends to be GPX based, so rally raid. So things like the Illyria raid, they're GPX based. So you're following a line on a map, and you're still racing, but you know where you are effectively. However, with a proper rally with a road book, you are following a piece of paper and a trip meter. If in the basic terms, you are relying on your trip meter being accurate and your navigation being accurate based on the bits that the road book is telling you at the time. Hard Alpi, as I say, the hard bit about that is the fact that you're riding a bike for a long period of time on some challenging terrain in areas. The difference with a rally is that you are riding a bike for a fairly long period of time. So then on average, the stages are sort of 8 hours long. You'd be riding at a decent pace for, and you're following a piece of paper, and you just keep going. And on that section, you'll, again, similar sort of thing. So you'll have a start time, you'll have a timed section, which is your special stage. And those times get added up and aggregate towards the end to find out who the overall winner is.
Seaton's got me worried now, because I'm signed up to the Hard Alpi Tour this year to go do it on the 1190, and I kind of thought of it as just like, oh, it's a bit of a holiday of some sort. I'm doing the extreme one, which I didn't really think about.
Brother.
Are you actually? Well, hey, we didn't even know that.
Ollie made a film of it, didn't he? So you can go and watch that.
Basically, just fell over all the time.
Yeah, he did.
Fucking useless.
Seats, assuming you're taking the 732.
Yep.
And Ed, you'll be on the 1190. Are you in the same class?
Yeah, we are. So it's not done by class, as I say. It's not a race. It's I think they call it a tour, isn't it? It's the Hard Alpi Tour.
I was going to say, even if you are in the same class, you're not in the fucking same class.
Yeah, I can't ride as fast as that boy.
Well, now you've got you all singing, all dancing. Best
yeah, but that just looks cool. It looks cool. It doesn't mean I'm any better.
I mean, it did look cool at the Sweetland Baja for the lap and a half or whatever it, whatever it did.
I wish you do your sighting lap, Ed, around the Walters Arena on the 1190. It's like, and now we're just coming up to this thing. You sound so chilled out. Like you're going 90 miles an hour.
Am I going to, because there's this whole kind of big bike, small bike kind of rivalry, and I see myself sort of in the middle. But one thing I will say is, like, big bikes are not good off road. I don't care what anyone says. It's a lot of fun, but they are crap off road. The race that
I'm recording this.
The track at Walters Arena it's fine. You can record it. I'll be completely honest with it, because the track around Walters that I did, I was doing 21 minutes or so. Billy Bolt did that same lap in 5 minutes on an enduro bike. Now,
seriously?
I'm not anywhere near the level of Billy Bolt, but you don't get rid of 75% of your lap time on rider ability like that. They are enduro bikes are just, and even I'm going to call out HP2 Mav now, because he's a big bike advocate, but even when he got his KTM 500, he was saying it's like cheating. It's so easy. I've spent all this time like tuning my big bikes to be better off road, and I could have just spent 2, 3, 4 grand and bought this, and it's already infinitely better.
He didn't mention that on the big bike versus small bike podcast.
I'm sure I'm going to get in lots of trouble now. I'm going to have to stop talking now. I've said too much. Don't air this. Don't air it.
Both big bike wankers admitted to having small bikes that they actually had more fun on, if I remember correctly.
I love big bikes, and I have a lot of fun on big bikes, but as I said, I spend more time trying to fix the 1190 than I do riding it at the minute.
So why the 1190 then? It sort of begs the question, right?
I mean, the original reasons to why I bought the 1190 is because I had a friend that was selling it for cheap, and I knew that it had already been crashed off-road all the time, so I just came in with a super low-ball offer. But the plan was the 1190 was going to be my all-round commuter and trail bike and everything, and that doesn't really work if you're going to essentially write the bike off every weekend, because then you can't go to work on Monday, which isn't ideal. So that plan sort of went out the window, and now it's just fun having a 150 horsepower horsepower dirt bike.
How friendly are the paddocks at these events that you go to? I mean, my experience is actually really positive. How have you guys found it?
Yeah, extremely.
Yeah, exactly the same as that. Everyone is super friendly.
Thinking back at this, because I was thinking about this earlier, when I did the year I was racing kind of quite competitively on hare and hounds, and this was before kind of mooses were commonplace, I had a rear puncher on the last lap of the first session, and during you get an hour lunch break to get food on, get water on, do maintenance. My main rival in my class spent that whole hour. He tried to give me a spare rear wheel, which wouldn't fit because it was a different hub, different spaces or so, and then he spent most of his lunch break helping me swap the tube out so I could get racing again to go for the second session. And he was we were like first and second within our class. If that doesn't kind of prove the point, like, I don't know what does. It is a really, at least in my experience, it's a really friendly environment.
Did you beat him?
I did, yes.
How serious are you both about the racing? We've kind of touched upon this already. Are you entering to win, or is it just a case of you're there to access some terrain you wouldn't normally ride and just have a crack ride in it? How's it work for you that way?
So for me, it depends on the event. Some of the bigger bike stuff, I go there to try and win. The international rallies and bits that I've done, I just go to complete it. So like most recently, the Qatar Baja, I was way out of my depth. I went there with the goal of finishing, and I finished all right in the end.
Sorry, you just said the Qatar Baja. Is this in the country of Qatar?
Correct, yep. So it was a 2-day Baja, which is a 2-day roadbook rally in Qatar. So sand dunes, desert tracks, all that sort of stuff.
Did you send your bike out, or?
Yeah, we did. So there was a group of, I think there was a group of 7 of us in the end from the UK, all shipped our bike out in a container about a month before the event. Went and rode the event and then shipped them back home, and they come back into the country today, I think, actually.
But who's organising all that shipping?
So this one is a completely unsupported event. So one of the guys that was going from the UK organised a container. He told us a date and a time to have the bikes loaded by, and we just went and did it. The special thing about the Qatar Baja, I would recommend it to anybody that's into that kind of riding or wants to have a go at that sort of riding, because the organisation was amazing. They paid for flights, accommodation, transport. All the only bits we had to put hand in our pocket was for our international license. So you need an FIM international license for the event, which I think was about 360 quid. And then we had to pay for the initial entry fee, which was, again, I think about 900 quid, but they refunded that £900 when you started the event.
As an international rider?
As an international rider, yeah. So it cost me 300 and whatever it was for the international license. That was it.
When you say that kind of riding, I think Baja, California, open desert, flat out.
Pretty much that, yeah. Pretty fast. The road book was a hard road book for me, being the first time I'd raced in that environment. Because in Europe, everything is done on a track pretty much. So it's turn left at this junction, turn right at that junction. Everything is fairly obvious. And there's only small sections of off-piste where you are trying to just ride on a compass bearing. Whereas in Qatar, the pistes were fairly nondescript, and there was a lot of turns at short distances. And then there's quite a bit of off-piste. You're then riding in the sand dunes. We did 60 kilometers in the sand dunes on the second day. I was ball bagged. That was a pure just hold on to the bike and keep it pinned. I just want to get out of here and just get to the end. It was a steep learning curve, but a great event. You don't find out about these things and find out about yourself until you go and do it.
So, Ed, I'll say it for you. It seems like you normally win most of the hare and hounds you enter in your class.
With the big bikes, I do a lot better. But with enduro, it's a bit of a tougher game. I used to take it a lot more serious than I do now. When I was only racing sort of hare and hounds or before the adventure bike riding, I was sort of racing for championship wins. And I did get my championship win in my class, which was E3 class, I think 2019 or so. But then after that, kind of the adventure biking stuff has kind of crept in. And from now, I don't take any of it as seriously. And I take the racing seriously, but race to race. So if you're going for a championship, you have to turn up to every race. If there's a race weekend, it doesn't matter what's happening that weekend. Your mates might be going to have fun in Wales, or, everyone going on holiday. You have to be at that race, because if you don't score points for that race, then you're kind of losing points in a championship. And if you have a bad day's race or a breakdown or you run out of fuel, it just gets really, really stressful, because you're thinking, this is my whole year that I've sort of thrown away. So after I won my E3 championship, and I kind of took a bit of a more chilled out approach to it now, and now I tend to do just race to race. So I'll be really competitive and try and win the race that I'm doing on that weekend, but not worry too much about if something fun's happening and I'm going to miss a race, or I want to go race with a different club, or it doesn't kind of bother me too much anymore.
We've talked about bike prep in a previous podcast with Joe from Desert Rose, but I guess we're operating at a slightly different level here. What sort of things do you need to do to your bikes before you rock up at the event?
It's probably more for seats for rally stuff, but for Hare and Hound Enduro, it's basically any maintenance you should always be doing to your bike. You just do it a bit more frequently. Obviously, especially if you're going for a championship, if you have a breakdown or some other issue, then you've blown a whole race. But generally, it's just, oil, filter, tyres, mousses, stuff like that. And you just do it a bit more frequently than if you're going trail riding.
Do you put a new set of tyres on for every race?
Depends on the track. If it's been a really muddy track, you won't even touch your tyres. They'll look brand new by the end. If it's a really stony kind of rough track, you'll probably spend a rear tyre in 4 hours. Quite often we'll change the tyres around, just swap the direction. Although most tyres they have an arrow of some sort to indicate a direction. Most people just swap them around so you get a fresh sharp edge of the tyre. And it's good to take the tyre off just to service the mousse as well. If you stick a mousse in and just leave it and don't touch it, then it will wear very quickly. But if you take it out, clean it off, re-lube it and refit it, then you can make them last a lot longer.
I'm just saying, with mousses, mine used to last about 3,000 miles and I never did any maintenance, but that just shows you how fucking slow I am.
I don't get 3,000 miles out of the mousse.
No, not at all.
They get a bit spongy like, but they don't break down. But that's true, isn't it? Dakar guys will get through a mousse every day.
Yeah, there's the famous videos, isn't there, of Toby Price cable tying his tyre back onto his rim to get him through the event.
Where do we think is a good place to start for somebody that wants to get into racing? What would you guys recommend?
Probably the sort of Hare and Hounds kind of stubble field with your local club. There's loads of clubs all over the UK. Facebook's really good for that now because they're all on there and they advertise the events. And just go along to one of the events.
Your riding sounds very expensive. Well, not very expensive, but much more expensive. And also, the bit I was thinking is there's a lot of organisation. Even your Qatar event, which was for all in purposes very, very cheap what it was, there's still a lot of planning and stuff that's involved.
There is, yeah.
Whereas for Hare and Hounds, it's like Saturday afternoon, stick your kit and your bike in the van, drive to a field, race on Sunday, come back, go to work on Monday. And
I was going to say the UK rallies are brilliant events as well, but
they are, yeah.
You've got to find one that's running still. That's really sad to hear that.
Yeah, so I think the Beacons is still going ahead, and then there's a round in the Isle of Man as well. I think they're the two final rounds this year, which are both great events.
They all sell out though, don't they? Entries go completely.
Yeah, you've got to be on them pretty quick to get an entry to them.
So after that, is it sort of Hellas and Gibraltar? I
mean, yeah, you start talking pretty expensive then to go and do those events, and it's a lot of time as well. Like the Gibraltar race is a 2-week race. You can do a week, the first week or the second week if you want to, but it's a 2-week event.
Even to get the bike set up is quite a serious investment, isn't it?
Yeah,
because generally,
exactly.
like you hypothetically, well, you don't go buy a factory rally bike from KTM. Like if you're just getting into it, you don't do that. So you buy an enduro bike and turn it into a rally bike, which I looked at a little bit during COVID when I was super bored and nothing else to do, and the costs to convert my enduro bike to a rally bike were really stacking up.
Lil Pavey did a little series about that recently, didn't he? It was quite.
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Good little video to watch that actually. Just to keep you abreast of Ollie, he says to you, Clive has my fucking phone number. Called him a beep for not texting me. He used me to become the #1 podcast and then he just fucking ditched me like a used paper towel.
That's not true. Absolute nonsense. Massive thanks to all three guests this week, to Will for helping to host and to Ed and Seats for their contributions. Really appreciate it. If you do end up doing any racing, make sure you let us know how you get on the usual socials, Facebook or Instagram. Right, see you next time. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time. soon.